Welcome to season 2 of the Human Design Profiles, an Entrepreneurship podcast. I'm your host, Chantel. I'm a 1-3 manifesting generator, small business strategist, workshop facilitator, and the author of the Aligned Action series for solo entrepreneurs. Thanks for joining us today on this podcast, an active learning experiment on how we all experience entrepreneurship as individuals through our human design profiles. Each episode profiles a human design enthusiast / business owner who's here to share about their introspection, how their personal profile lines influence their entrepreneurship journey, how they use what they know about their profile to set intentions, and what this looks like for them personally in the implementation phase with every decision they make on a daily basis as business owners. Today, I'm connecting with Aly, who spends her time these days between the material and mystical worlds. As a 5-1 generator, she is infinitely curious and loves to use human design knowledge and wisdom to empower others with practical solutions that help them to easefully step into their highest expression. She draws on years of experience from across a wide range of industries and roles, working in the fields of personal development, fashion, media, wellness, marketing, graphic design, product design, styling, entrepreneurship, and finally, art and interior design. Have a listen while today's guest, Aly, a 5-1, shares her story while you read between the lines. So, Aly, I see in your bio that you even have practical solutions right in there, which is so 5-line of you. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, when I learned human design, I was like, oh, all right. Yeah, I get it. I just am the one with always trying to think about what is practical. And human design actually feels like the most practical thing to me. I know it can be like a system that's, sort of mystical, but I think it's the most practical thing because it gives us very tangible, actionable ways to interact with life, with other people in our world. So that feels like the most practical thing ever. Yeah.
I agree. Although the system seems confusing when you're first looking at the chart, visually it's a bit overwhelming. I agree that the practical implementations of it are unparalleled, really, in any kind of system that I've found out there.
Yeah, it's just helped people that I work with. It's helped me work with people in a better way. So I can know what their strategy and authority is, and I can know their type, and I know how to communicate with them. I know when to give them space. I know when to trust their first answer. I know what their environments are, and all of those lead to practical, efficient ways of communicating and being and getting answers.
We share the one line, and I love using my clients' charts for informational purposes as well, and really customizing my communication to them. Similar to you, I look at people's charts. I don't do readings, that's not part of my suite of offerings, but I do look at charts to see, like you said, how I should be phrasing questions, how I should be making space for the answers, just how they might prefer to take in information, all of that. So maybe that's a little one-line thing that we share, but I love using it for information purposes. It's like a little bit of a manual for the people that we're working with.
Yeah, completely.
Okay, so thinking about the 5-1 profile as a whole, how does that role or character feel for you?
It feels very accurate. When I first learned about it, I just felt this embodied sigh of relief, like, oh, that makes so much sense. And I realized I hadn't given myself permission to be a first line, but it explained a lot because I felt like, oh, I should either know everything or why do I have this desire to get to the bottom of things? Why do I always need to know? Maybe I should just like chill out a little bit. So the first line gave me permission to just like really unleash my desire to investigate.
Hmm.
And the fifth line, that's really interesting. That's been a journey of deconditioning and understanding the projection field. I was someone who I grew up as being a total people pleaser. If you can do it, you say yes. And so I said yes all the time. I just about never said no. Sometimes it worked out and sometimes it didn't. I mean, often I could figure it out, but it wouldn't always be delightful experience. And sometimes when I didn't quite do it as someone expected, my reputation would be a little tarnished. I'd feel like, oh my God, I didn't do that. I wasn't the best there. So there was a lot of pressure of being the best. And since learning human design, I've given myself a little bit more space to say yes to the correct projections and no to the incorrect ones. And that's actually been a really powerful experience, seeing how
Absolutely.
when you say yes to the right ones, what happens. And when you say no, I was afraid of saying no. It's actually quite powerful to say no to something that's not aligned, because then the yeses are way more potent.
For sure. And were you finding that you were already on that journey to finding your no before you found human design, or did human design enable you to do that?
I was nowhere near it. Yeah, human design gave me permission to start saying no to things, and it's taken a while. I'm 6 years into my experiment, so it's been a minute, or maybe seven. I don't know, somewhere around there. Yeah, it's been a practice to learn to say no, to trust that I can say no to things, and then other things will still come.
Hmm. And as you're developing wisdom in that, what does it look like now? How do you know when it's a no?
How do I know? Well, I'm a generator. So learning this has been also been a process of understanding that embodied feel of like, I don't have the energy for this. It feels like a little bit of a contraction of, and then I can think like, oh, I'd rather not do this. Like, I actually don't want to do, and that's okay. Like
Hmm.
that's still a practice. But yeah, it's this, I feel like my body almost pulls back a little bit, saying your energy does not want to go that direction. So that's, yeah, that's kind of my no.
No, I'm gonna start that again. Do you feel like the people pleasing has diminished, or is that still a strong urge for you that you have to course correct from constantly?
It has definitely diminished.
Okay.
It's definitely diminished because I've seen how much better it is for me and the other people who are part of the equation when I say yes to correct things and no to incorrect ones, because then that also gives somebody else an opportunity where they're in their zone of genius. Like if I say no to something, there's room for someone else to show up
That's true.
correctly.
And they can step in and take care of that instead.
Yeah, and that's been a refrain I've had to remind myself of, like, you saying no gives somebody else the opportunity to say yes. Because
That
I felt like,
is
oh,
a
the
fantastic
fifth line
insight.
guilt.
Yeah, I know. The fifth line in particular, obviously, it's the profile that's most misunderstood, right? That checks out. But I think it's tough for people when they discover they're a fifth line because there is that, I'd say, negativity around the fifth line in the human design space in general. What would you say to someone who has recently discovered they're a five line? And how do you think that your advice could help them in that journey?
Great question, because actually a friend of mine who I've known for years finally got her birth information and gave it to me yesterday. She's a 5-1.
Oh, no way.
Yes.
You have so much to share.
I have so much to share. Yeah. So I was thinking, okay, how do I tell someone about being a fifth line? And I guess I would say, what do you do that you feel like you do out of obligation? What do you do because you think you should, or because you can, so you think you should? To learn what the projection field is and feels like is really important. And that way they can get in touch with where they're actually aligned in saying yes, which projections are correct for them.
Listeners of this show tend to have varying levels of human design knowledge. They're at different points in their exploration. Can you define the projection field as you've come to understand it?
I can try. A projection field feels like people looking to you to fix things. Like where, oh, you can do this. You can probably do this. You should be able to do this. And often fifth lines can, they can figure it out. So it takes some understanding of your own energy, your own type, your own strategy and authority to figure out which projections are correct. Or I don't know, maybe they were raised like that. Like if you don't want to do it, don't do it. So yeah, it just feels like people always look to you to be the savior, to be the one to be able to fix things. And it feels like pressure, like, oh, I should be able to do this. Yeah, so I guess that's what it feels like. And then also, there is a bit of this of never really feeling seen because there's so many projections. So in one way, it's sort of flattering, like, oh, you think I can do that? That's great. Wow. And then in another way, you think, well, why would you think of me for that? Don't you know me at all? So it's kind of like a double-edged sword there, because on one side it feels nice to be seen as competent, and then on the other side it feels like not being seen for who you truly are.
Right. The lack of accuracy must be a challenge.
Yeah, and I think it's something as you get familiar with it and your own strategy and authority, you kind of see yourself in ways and
Mm.
understand that by using yourself helps others see you more
Mhm.
appropriately. But
Mhm.
it's a constant thing.
Yeah.
Even in close, intimate relationships. And sometimes, like with my husband, we've been together 27 years and we're both fifth lines. And sometimes I'm like, we don't even know each other. And then on the other side, we know each other very well. But there's these funny things where we're just both like totally confused. How could you not know that about me?
Right. I guess in one sense it's nice to be surprised, but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's head over to the one line side of things. You mentioned earlier that the one line, you had previously not been giving yourself permission to do that. What were some of your first one line investigations like once you discovered that you were one line? What did you research and how was that experience?
I researched human design as
Mhm.
soon as I found out. Like, it actually took me about hearing about it about 3 or 4 times. I was very skeptical.
Me too.
Yeah. So it took me like 3 or 4 times. But then once I started to get it and I had a reading, and that was where I felt seen for the first time in my life, with some random stranger on the internet like telling me about myself, that I was like, wow. That was my first line thing. I dove deep into it, and I've been studying ever since.
What does studying look like for you in your life and in your business? Are you a reader or?
I read, I take classes, I listen to audiobooks and podcasts. It's kind of, I feel like a sponge. Any medium possible resonates with me at different times.
Do you like to research one thing at a time and go really deep into that? Or do you like to have multiple research projects going on at a time?
I have multiple research projects going on. I have my bedside table. I have to like clear out my bedside every once in a while because I'll end up with like 20 books there. And I'm like,
Mhm.
this is ridiculous. I can't read 20 books at a time, even though like I try and I really want to. But
So, what is currently on your research docket or on your TBR list?
in terms of business, let me think. More human design, definitely diving more deeply. I'm an analyst training for that. I'm just about to finish. So that's been quite a process. For business, I'm having a really hard time thinking of a lot about like subconscious work and mindset work.
Mhm.
Actually, I can't think of a title in particular,
You said you were
but if I
launching a
think of
pod or two podcasts. Have you been diving into
yes,
podcast stuff at all?
I have been. Yeah, that I'm actually tiptoeing in a little bit, which is funny to think about because, yeah, I usually do investigate. So I've been recording, but I haven't done the editing parts yet. And I'm starting a podcast with another friend who's a human design reader as well. So we're starting together using human design and gene keys. And they use that a lot for business, human design and gene keys.
How do you find that Gene Keys adds to human design as a modality?
So I see human design as the super practical structure, the
Mhm.
foundation. Like it gives you, you can do this for this outcome, or this is how you're designed to interact in the world, like mechanical. And
Mhm.
then Gene Keys is a whole other experience. It just feels like sort of like if human design is the structure, you pour the Gene Keys into it and
Mhm.
you swim around and contemplate in that space. And that's a very non-linear kind of thing with contemplations. Things just pop up, ideas and thoughts. Sort of feels like a meandering walk without a real destination, and you just discover things along the way.
That's been my experience too, reading the Gene Keys book. I haven't been able to sit down for a solid cover to cover reading, but I
Mhm.
find sometimes I'm looking up things in my chart or I'm reading based on the transits, or sometimes I'm just responding to something else. Certainly, my experience with Gene Keys is very nonlinear.
I think that's how it's designed to be. And it can even be used as an oracle, just sort of like open it up. And amazingly, that's like what you needed to hear today or
Mhm.
contemplate, or it's something that's relevant to what's going on in your world.
Yeah, absolutely. I ran my Pearl sequence chart. and I
Mm.
downloaded a few of the books, but I haven't really gone into that too much yet. But I'd say that's one of my one-line fascinations right now as well.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to chat more about it. That's actually what our my podcast is with my friend. It's human design and
Oh,
gene. So like how
oh,
we weave,
exciting.
yeah, so
Do you
how
have a
we weave
name
those things.
for the show yet?
We don't.
Okay. You know what? You update me and I'll put it in the show notes once it's all ready to go because I'm sure that there's crossover in our listenership.
Yeah, I would say the fun thing about Gene Keys is I feel like for me, a friend of mine recommended it and I was like, I don't need another system to investigate. And then I looked at one of them that I have prevalent in my chart, and there was one word that just got me. It just hooked me, like just one word. And I was like, okay, I got to go down this rabbit hole. And that was about 5 years ago. So it's been, yeah, an interesting journey. I feel like that's kind of how the gene keys work. They just sort of like something hooks you.
Do you remember which word it was?
I do. It was compromise. The 14 I
Oh,
have 3 times in my chart. So
okay. Interesting. So, since we're chatting about gates, tell me about any particular gates that you feel support you on your entrepreneurial journey.
okay. Well, 14 definitely supports me. That's the capacity to be very resourceful
Mhm.
and to have resources for others. I have been a part of a number of startups, and I feel like that energy of the 14 just really supports that. It's just like this rush of sacral power that can help business. Yeah. Like knowing where resources can come from, how to use resources, how to manage them. So that's how it's good for scrappy startups. Gate 53 is also really great for entrepreneurship. It is about starting things. So it's the capacity to start. And so I'm always starting things. So that is really great for entrepreneurship because I constantly have this energy available that goes like, let's go, let's start this.
And that makes sense as a generator too. So, you've got like that kind of doubled, layered onto each other.
Yes. And then the 32 is about understanding what is worth or what things are likely to be successful. So that's I only have the 32. I don't have the 54. So I don't have the whole channel, but often I find myself with other people that light that up for me. So yeah, I can discern often what things will be successful and which are maybe not for this time.
And so, if you were to turn that gaze inward and think about what is on the horizon next for you, what are you leaning towards? What feels like the right next steps?
Yeah, so thank you for that question because I've been mulling this over in my mind of how to start to move into the next phase. And I do human design, which has been just such a huge part of my life for the last several years. And I do interior design. And I'm finding a way to kind of have them come together in one, like how I communicate with people, but then also understanding what kind of spaces are good environments for people. So that's been an interesting thing. I sort of thought they needed to be separate, but I'm feeling more and more like they can go together. And more people I talk to about it go like, "Oh wow, that's so cool. That was like such an interesting way to work with design." So I've been having a few test clients in that, and it's been really fun. Sort
Mhm.
of brings a whole other layer of understanding.
Yeah, well, environment in particular is so, I don't want to say crucial in terms of an experiment, but it is, I've heard it's very transformational. I've spoken to a few people on the show who say, like I moved physical locations to more to support my environment and then everything clicked into place. Or like there's that element of a massive change when it comes to environment, which is really cool. I've had people ask me if different seasons of this show are going to focus on different elements of our charts. And I do think that's really cool, but it messes with my whole profile pun. So the show is staying centered on profile. But if I were to choose another element, I would definitely go towards environment because we have such strong feelings about our environment just in general. But then it's something that for me it's easy to respond to the idea of an environment in maybe a way that some of the other variables are a little tougher to connect with. I don't know if you how you feel about that.
Yeah, again, like as a fifth line, I think it's super practical. It makes so much sense. Our environments, our homes, our offices are where we spend a lot of time, and we want to feel good in them. We want to feel energized and or relaxed. We want to feel like what we need in that moment. And the human design environment is it's amazing. I mean, the more I dive into it and the more I look around at people, I can see just how that affects people when
Mm.
they're not living in their correct environment as opposed to when they are. Like if
Yeah.
you're a caves person, you want to feel safe. You want to feel like, nothing's going to surprise you, that you have like dominion over your space. And that I was just talking to somebody about interior design and that, and we were going over, and she's like, my home doesn't feel good. I like everything in it, but it just doesn't feel good. And I've never seen her home, but I asked her a few questions about her furniture and how she had it laid out. And it was all sort of floating in the center of the room. And that is just so not caves because it's not grounded at all. It doesn't have any, because when she's sitting on her sofa, it feels like someone can come up from behind. And she was like, that's amazing because in every other place I felt good and I had a totally different layout.
Mm.
So I haven't talked to her since then, but she said she was going to go, see what she could do about switching the layout of her furniture.
That would be a
Um,
fascinating case study to read to see how
yeah,
that shift changed things.
yeah. I'll have to
Yeah.
ping her again and find out.
Yeah, let me know if you do. I'm curious.
Okay.
I I can attest to that environment piece as well. My environment is kitchens wet, and I've lived in cities of various sizes and towns of various sizes, and once even so rural that it wasn't even in a town. And I really struggled the more remote or the smaller the place that I lived. That was a real challenge for me. Where I live now, I'm deep in suburbia. As we're looking at house listings, I'm like, okay, I can't go further out than this because I need to keep that connection to like the creative core to be able to
Yeah.
be accessible to downtown. I know that if I get something where there's no houses facing us, there's nothing across from us, that's not going to feel good for me. And so I definitely keep my environment in mind with that. What's
That's
your environment?
Mine is caves,
Okay.
actually. So
Yeah.
yeah.
My partner is
Um,
capes, and we've rearranged this office setup so that this, like, the back is to the back of the house. It used to be back to the open space, so we just shifted it 90 degrees.
yep.
We would really love to be able to have a door on the office space that closes. We're hoping for that in the next house, but yeah, we have played around a little bit with that environment.
Yeah. And did he notice the difference?
Yeah, he's an MG like me, and he's very comfortable no matter what. He's just one of those people that is comfortable all the time.
Yeah.
It's something that I really admire and aspire to. I think he would say that he was fine before and fine now, which is great.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, it's probably like just an overall like safe feeling area for him. Maybe it doesn't have to be so micro, it might not be like that sensitive.
Yeah, I mean, now like there's an eye on both doorways. You can see the front door from this space, you can see the doorway to the kitchen. There's better vantage points in this one for sure. How did you make your space more cavey?
I have a view to the door and I have my
Mhm.
back to the wall. But it's a constant, I'm constantly moving around and trying to figure out like what feels good today.
Very cool.
But
So when we first started talking about environment, you mentioned how you love that element because it's so practical. And
mhm.
that practicality seems to be a five-line theme, something that resonates for you. How have you maybe practiced concepts in terms of message?
That is a work in progress, actually. I feel like it's easier for me to do that for other people than myself. I think because it's just I have a different view. And I'm also a 61.5 in my sun, my conscious sun. So it's like I'm here to find truth and inspiration for others. So it's not necessarily easy for me to turn that internally.
Yeah, that makes a lot of
Um,
sense.
and the
And
other thing is I have 7 open centers. So I feel like I am constantly changing, it depends on who's around or the transits and very flexible and fluid in that.
oh, that's fascinating. My chart is the opposite. I have
Oh, wow.
eight centers defined and one center undefined, nothing open. So
Wow. What's
about
your
as far
undefined
from that
center?
experience. Solar plexus.
Oh, okay.
That's interesting. And so what do you have defined?
My sacral and G center.
Oh, cool. I can feel that, the strong sense of identity that resonates. We've just met, but I can feel that
Yeah,
energy
you can
from
feel it.
you. Yeah,
I get that reflection a lot. Like people know, see me, but I'm like, I don't know, because I'm feeling everyone else.
right. Oh, that's fascinating. And so with Gate 61, the inspiration for others, how have you factored that into what you're choosing to offer in your business?
Great question. I'm gonna be honest, I kind of have no idea. It just sort of comes out naturally. I guess it's kind of the fifth line. I say yes to a projection. Like I fall into things often. People see me as able to do something and they're inspired in some way to ask me, and I'm like, okay. And so that in turn inspires me to offer that. And I might not have seen it in myself necessarily, but then I get that response of like, oh, that sounds fun, or that I actually have the energy for that. So that's kind of how things have worked out, is just sort of following the responses. I don't often have a plan. It might be like, I don't know, like a really not really businessy thing to say. My plans
No,
sort of evolve along the way.
that's absolutely acceptable and very much relatable for a lot of us. I mean, obviously, human design for each business owner, there's a unique individual chart attached to it. And although it may not be the conventional business advice, I think a lot of us are flowy and spontaneous in that way. Not really me so much because of my definition in my chart, but certainly other people that I've talked to on the show have that kind of flowy feel as well. And like you said, that's the correct response for you. You want to be in response and you want to have inspiration brought to you and test things out. That sounds correct for you, maybe not correct in the sense of the conventional boring business wisdom, but
Yeah.
correct for you.
Okay, so I'll be a business heretic here and say that, like, yeah, when I actually do try to plan and be a little bit more rigid, the energy just stops. It
Mhm.
just, like, I've tried this so many times. I think, oh, okay, well, I got this to this point. Now let me like run it like a real business. And the energy often just stops when I get too rigid and structured. So
Yeah.
I've learned to buck the system, I guess, or it's still a process.
Yeah. The word that came to me when you were saying that was just flat. Like it just falls flat instead of maybe like layered or expansive or
That's
thing.
exactly it. Yeah,
Mhm.
it just falls flat. Like there's no creativity, there's no momentum, there's no growth or expansion,
Mhm.
just sort of dries up.
Yeah. If you could have someone see you accurately right now, where your energy is for working with people, where would that be?
I guess I would say, I know my chart is, it's very like, just those two centers, and I only have two channels, and it's all about empowering other people.
Mhm.
So, in I can't help but see possibilities for people, like working with them. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like every chart, I'm like, this is the greatest chart I've ever seen. And I'm like, oh, you have this and you have that and you have this. And it's just like seeing the possibility, like really seeing people is
Yeah.
like such a great joy for me. I do one-on-one sessions and I do a coaching program. The other thing that I think would be super helpful for 5/1s, I noticed after COVID just how important it is. Like 5/1 is transpersonal, and just how important it is for overall life force energy for 5/1s to be around other people. Like, because I don't get to live out my karma or destiny alone. I need to interact with other people. And that was like such a huge lesson after COVID, because I really noticed a difference when we could go back into the world.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And you said you know a few other 5/1s personally. Was that something that they experienced as well?
Yeah, I think they're all a little bit hungry for other people. They haven't sort of specifically, I guess, because they're not human design people, but they know like, oh, I need to get out and see people. Yeah, so it's a definitely a thing for 5/1s.
Thank you for all of your insights into that 5/1 profile. It was really great hearing from you and your thoughts. on practicality and on projection field and all of that.
Thank you so much for having me. That's delightful.
Yeah. So we'll flow into our closing ritual, which is pulling an affirmation card from Christina from Glow Juice HD's deck. So if you're ready, you and I will take a deep breath in together and let that go. The card that I've pulled today is I have an incredible ability to see unique solutions, and I trust that the right people and opportunities will find me.
Yeah, that resonates. I feel like that's exactly what I've been talking about today. Yeah.
That's great, Aly. Where can people connect with you online?
I have a website. It's called theallysphere.com, and there's a blog with some information on human design. And I also have one-on-one sessions and coaching package, and on Instagram at the Aly Sphere.